Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today to discuss managing performance and engagement whilst you have your teams and colleagues working from home. Just quickly to introduce myself, my name is Becca, Global Account Manager at Access First, and with me today I have Nick Miller on behalf of PayFit.
Hi everyone.
Who I shall pass over to you in a little bit. So there is at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A section that you can click on. Please feel free to post any questions that you have throughout the webinar, and we'll try to get as many answered as possible by the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Oh, technical glitch. There you go. That's not necessarily a good start. There you go. So with the majority of your teams working from home at the moment, what does that actually mean for the management of your teams? If from the perspective of a team leader, if you're a team leader or manager, or what if you're a team member, are the ideal communication channels for you to be receiving from your boss? As I mentioned, my name is Becca. What I specifically wanted to cover today is to get us thinking a little bit more about how our small actions can improve people's performance whilst you're working from distance from one another. Now, in order to look closely at why people's performance varies from one another, we need to look at the link between performance and motivation. Once we've looked at this link, I'm going to run you through what we do here at Access First, which includes, quite interestingly, how to measure motivations in individuals. So really giving you that ability to understand how that information can be used to enhance, to encourage, and ultimately to manage somebody's performance. And then finally, I just wanted to run through quickly how we can do this step by step in everyday practice. How do we use this information to manage somebody's performance? So, starting with this topic of personality versus motivation, popping up in the last century or so, this evaluation of motivation is now a major topic in work psychology. What drives a person to engage in an action? And the first renowned researchers on motivation competed to develop a universal model of motivation. And what further research has shown is that motivation cannot be explained by a single factor, but is in fact multifaceted. Now, I don't know if there's any psychologists out there listening. If there are, you probably will recognize Latham and Pinder, which was a specific study developed and gives an excellent overview of works on this subject, which basically arrived to the following points, the following conclusion. Quite interestingly so, especially in this topic that we talk about today, satisfaction at work is closely linked to performance. Maybe you can relate to that if you think about your role and your team on a day-to-day basis. Motivation at work reduces the desire to quit a job. And then motivation at work reduces absenteeism and increases commitment to a position. So these are all positive things, right? We can see that this research tells us that there is a significant link between this idea of motivation and performance. Now, bearing this in mind, how do we manage people's motivations whilst working remotely? Firstly, as I mentioned before, we need to be more informed about people's motivations. This is what we do here at Access First. Our tool has been developed to help you identify those candidates out of all of those candidates that you see apply to one role, who will be most successful within that role, who will be the most likely to sit in this upper right-hand quartile here, those most happy and those most engaged. And therefore, because they'll be the happiest and because they'll be the most motivated at work, they'll be performing above and beyond the expectation. Now, how do we do that? That's the big question. We focus upon the potential of candidates. And when we consider this idea of potential in individuals, there are three key elements that we feel necessary to assess. So starting on the left-hand side, reasoning. Now, it's not a mental agility test, not an IQ test, sorry. It's looking at level of mental agility of candidates. So what kind of information can a candidate process, at what extent, and at what speed? Secondly, and this really captures upon the discussion point today, is we look at motivations. We feel that's really, really necessary. We know 9 times out of 10 candidates don't leave their jobs because they can't do roles, or they're not unable to, and simply because either they don't get on with their manager, or what they're doing on a day-to-day basis just isn't what they want to be doing. And so this motivational piece is really important. And then the third aspect is personality. We look at how somebody behaves in certain situations. Now, we have the 3 assessments here that we have devised. And in conclusion, all 3 of those assessment results will be able to tell us the natural talents of an individual. What's really, really interesting there is that we can then compare those natural talents, those pure assessment results, to a predictive model. And this gets where it gets really, really interesting, because we can define a predictive model and really define what good looks like. Now, what we've done during this period of confinement is we have actually created an assess-first predictive model based upon working from home. So what we've done is we've defined those traits associated with working from home and created a model from it. Because, working from home, some of you may have already kind of felt this personally, but it's not necessarily a format for everyone. And using this predictive model will help you be able to identify who, whether it be within your team, amongst your colleagues, will be most suited for working from home, and whose natural disposition means they find it difficult and struggle, or vice versa. And so looking at 2 opposing sides, we can see 2 very different outcomes of working from home. First off, here you can see the results of a study that's been created from Karen Sober-Lejeski. What she's done is she's focused in on the impact of technology and performance, and she concludes the following: that actually, when working from home, you see a strong decline in performance, up to 80% decline in engagement, 80% reduction in job satisfaction, 70% reduction in project success, and 90% reduction in innovation. And then a much more positive study that was highlighted when they looked at a similar study of working from home was actually a strong increase in performance was witnessed. 20% increase in productivity, an extra 45 minutes in bed of sleep, reduction in obviously 15% office costs, and a reduction in 50% on absenteeism. Now, whichever way performance is determined, it's obvious that it will vary when working from home. And most importantly, your control and performance may be harder to keep track of because of this distance. And so this is where the working from home model may be able to help. And so with that, looking at the scientific literature, there are 2 aspects to consider when working from home. And therefore, these 2 aspects is what we considered when creating this predictive model. The first is the connection with others, the relationship between others. There are some people that better manage working from distance, who require less dependency, and then there are others who feel it's really important to have their everyday exchanges, to share their emotions, their feelings on a day-to-day basis. And that physical distance, therefore, can be quite difficult for them to manage. Now, the second aspect that I spoke about is structure. The uncertainty that could be created with distance is something that some people are at ease with, and is something that for other people cannot help them in advance, can really hinder their self-development. And so these 2 aspects are 2 things that we have modeled, and we've highlighted through the predictive model functionality that we generate on our platform. What you can see here is this predictive model. So you can see, for example, the green zone highlighted there and spontaneously approaches other trait that we measure through this assessment. Where there is ultimately, we want to be seeing someone score 1 to 4 in this trait. And that 1 to 4 scoring will be able to indicate that this type of personality doesn't necessarily have a tendency or a need to develop relationships, which obviously lends itself to this working from home atmosphere. That type of individual doesn't need to be surrounded by colleagues in the office, for example. The fact that we would expect preferred various tasks to have a low scoring could correspond as well to the fact that when you're working from home, you're working in the same continuous environment. And so we've modeled that on personality, and also here, motivation. These are the expected motivations that we would associate with working from home. And what we can see is that we have those when we're looking at just specifically taking the sample size of Assess First and my group of colleagues. We've compared my group of colleagues with this working from home model. And you can see that there's some people who really fit with the working from home model and others who really don't. And it's all based upon those natural talents, those natural motivations and natural personality. You can see here those, Tuka, for example, Christopher, Morgan, they are all working well within this environment. And then there are others who really don't necessarily get on well with the working from home environment at all. And when we actually look then behind the scenes at those who have taken working from home in the last 3 years, in talking about our business now in Assets First, it actually was highlighted that those who scored really, really high, so those who had a high scoring in that comparison, were actually, took actually 40% more days of working from home in the business. Now, the first thing I want to note at this level here is that obviously working from home is a subject that we cannot think about and organize in a uniform manner because there are some amongst us who are naturally inclined to be more productive and enjoy working from home than others. And so you will find frustration amongst those who wish for more working from home and those who think it's just too much and may well be forced to take it. Interestingly, obviously, at the moment, we don't really have a choice. And so it's all about this idea of adapting. And so what we've done here now is we've added this element of looking at structure. It's not just a case of looking at their potential fit with working from home, but looking further and investigating their maturity when faced with structure. Are they somebody who works autonomously? Are they somebody who really has no problem with their decision-making skills? We have them looked at the relational aspect. So who naturally is inclined to find, cutting people off and working on their own easier rather than feel frustrated. And so we can see that there are people in the team who work really well without structure, as you can see here, and those who really do not agree with structure and require a little bit more stability. And equally, we can see those who are very at ease to manage relationships at a distance and those who will demonstrate frustration here in red when they don't have that interaction on a day-to-day basis. Now, it would be really interesting to see what you all think on this question. And if you wish for us to arrange for either yourselves or your teams to be compared against this working from home model, then we can certainly do that. Feel free to type in the Q&A section and we'll get in contact and we can sort that out for you. So finally, what I wanted to quickly touch upon is this idea of putting all of that into action. These are 3 of our top tips on once you have that information on how somebody is motivated from working from home, what actions can you put in place to manage the performance of your teams? First off is team visibility. If your remote workers are spread out all over the world or even across, just the UK, keeping track of who's working on what can seem really quite daunting. But with the right tools, you can see what everyone's working on without any hassle. The first requirement is solid team visibility, not so that you can necessarily micromanage, but so you can understand progress, offer support to those who need it, and keep everyone pulling in the same direction with the same vision. Secondly, is keeping a healthy workload. So visibility of your remote support team also helps you ensure that your employees have a healthy workload. When you're working remotely, when you're far from each other, you don't have that same physical contact, that physical separation between work and home. You can't just step out the office, leave your job behind, because you may well be working in your kitchen where you eat dinner. And so by seeing every employee's workload, you can monitor burnout and really make sure that everyone in your team is doing their fair share. And then finally, supporting remote worker autonomy. Trust is essential when you're all working from home and you're far from each other. Managers need to make sure that each remote team member is self-disciplined and ultimately in control of their own productivity and comfortable working without any supervisors. But this trust goes both ways. And so remote workers should really feel that they can be trusted in their work and be trusted to make the decisions, the right decisions on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon. I hope that gives you a little bit of food for thought. As I mentioned, if you want to compare our model to the working from home model, feel free to just shout out on Q&A now. And I'll now pass you over to Nick. Let me just stop sharing that. There you go.
Thanks a lot, Becca. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, great. So I'm the managing director for PayFit UK. PayFit is a company that was launched in 2015. We grew very quickly and are now in 4 countries. We originally started in France, but now in Germany, Spain, and the UK. We have over 500 employees, PayFitters, and 4,000 customers across different industries. In terms of what we do, we help our customers to automate and integrate payroll and HR processes. So whether it's managing your monthly pay slips, submitting to HMRC, getting your employees paid, generating reports around payroll, and providing employees in your company a portal to manage their leaves, their absences, submit expenses, and onboard new employees. We provide that technology to our customers, and on top of that, have a team of account managers and payroll experts to support and guide our customers on a daily basis. So our mission at PayFit is to make work a source of fulfillment. So this is making work a source of fulfillment for all of our customers, but equally making work a source of fulfillment for all the people working at PayFit. And fulfillment can mean different things for different people. And so what we've highlighted here are 6 key drivers that help to drive fulfillment. So your relationship with your manager, finding meaning in the work that you do, feeling trusted and trusting your colleagues, having an environment which is conducive and pleasant to work in, and maintaining a healthy work-life balance, as well as having the right career opportunities and opportunities to develop yourself. So as hundreds of thousands of other businesses in the UK and across Europe and the world have also experienced over the last few weeks, the way that we're working has completely changed. And we've identified other areas that we need to focus on to ensure that we can continue to deliver a fulfilling work environment. So on top of the 6 pillars that I mentioned, we're now focusing as well on topics like exercise, connecting, and having fun. So it's clear that when we go from a normal working environment to a fully remote working environment, the number of interactions and connections within the team naturally reduce. And so we need to try as much as possible to encourage connections across multiple different teams, departments, and countries. So a few of the examples of the things that we've done are to have more regular company-wide updates so that everyone's up to date, what's the key things in the company, what's going on. We're also doing weekly pulse surveys. So as Becca mentioned, everyone reacts differently to the situation, and a pulse survey is a great way to collect feedback on how people are doing and what are the things that we can do to improve. We also have started doing weekly Q&A with leaders so that we can really encourage as much transparency as possible and allow all the different team members to have the questions that are relevant to them answered. On an individual basis, we encourage managers to have more interaction with their team members. It's clear that working remote, you have those much fewer random ad hoc interactions with people in your team, and therefore making sure that you make the time to have one-to-ones with people in your team is increasingly important. And then we also have informal e-coffees where different members of the team can talk about a topic of their expertise. And it's a different way for people to understand what other people do and what other people are working on. So that's obviously a key area that we're focusing on more. Another one is health and well-being. So work-life balance is one thing when everyone is in the same office, but now that people are working fully remote, I think it's extremely important to recognize as an organization that every single person's routine has changed, and it will take time for different people to adapt to their new routine. And as an organization, it's our responsibility to make sure that people have the right techniques, understand what may be the right techniques in terms of how to have a productive work environment, taking the right amount of breaks, staying healthy in terms of eating and exercise. So we also schedule the different opportunities throughout the week for people to do exercise so they're not sat in the same seat all day. And we're opening up communication channels with everybody in the company to share best practices and different ideas about how to maintain the right level of work-life balance, because it's easy to get swayed into a new working schedule which you're not comfortable with. And importantly, not just work-related connections and interactions, but social interactions have massively reduced. So it's important for us to make sure that we still give the right platform and opportunities to people to interact and have fun. So we've organized virtual games. We identified that the right number of people for these games was below 10. And so we have different groups that rotate all the time. Weekly competitions, challenges that can be set and people can participate in. E-drinks, so just regular opportunity for people to catch up, whether that's having drinks or just having a platform to connect and have that kind of water cooler chat that you might have as you have a coffee or go for a cigarette or whatever it may be. Making sure that we have those organized and structured way so that people can opt in and join the ones that they find most relevant. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of achieving a fulfilling work environment, your relationship with your manager is extremely important. And being a great manager requires slightly different things when we're working fully remote. I think that, as Becca mentioned, visibility is super important. And so now, as things change, perhaps objectives have changed and the vision may have changed, and being really clear and transparent about what is the short, midterm, long-term vision for the company, making sure that everyone in your team understands that. What are the objectives as a company, but also individually for all the different team members, and the expectations that you have, and being really transparent around what those are, and create objectives that are quite trackable and easy to assess. And then carrying on from what Becca said, making sure that you trust and empower your team to perform. If you've given them the tools and the foundations, and as well as the direction in which direction to focus in, then you should trust those team members to perform, connect as regularly as possible, and importantly, have tolerance for different working arrangements. When you're working in the same office, everyone's working arrangement is the same. But now that we're working remotely, it's important to recognize that personal and work lives are closer linked than ever before, and people have different challenges, whether it's the working environment, the tools that they have, their personal life, family life, whatever it may be, and that may impact their schedule and how they work. And being tolerant that this has different impacts on different people as a manager is quite important, to make sure that you support them in a way that makes sense for them. And equally important as a manager is that to take care of your own well-being, to make sure that you have the right balance in your life, in your working arrangement, so that you can stay mentally refreshed, will make you a much better manager and ensure that you can encourage the right kind of mental well-being with your team. So about performance, some of the things that you might need to focus a bit more on as a team and when assessing performance is understanding what are the frequency of reviewing performance, and making sure that you assess, you have very clear and transparent communication around what are the objectives that the team member has and the ways to assess that performance. You have less and less kind of casual interactions with your team. So making sure that you are completely aligned on what are the new expectations in the working environment that we're in, what are the ways that you're going to look at, what are the kind of key performance indicators that are easy to track, that you're completely aligned with, that you'll be looking at over the next few weeks and months to assess performance, and being aligned on those is much more important now than ever before. And perhaps looking at how often you review performance and having more kind of less formal checkups around it. People don't know, it's harder to know how well you're doing when you're working remotely, especially if it's something that you've shifted towards for the first time. And so perhaps increasing the frequency on pulse check on how team members are doing versus their objectives may be more relevant. And still making sure that you take the time to invest in learning and development. So it's not just about the objectives, it's also ensuring that people have the support they need to develop themselves. So those are some of the actions that we've implemented over the course of the last few weeks, and we'll continue to build on and evolve over the next few months, as we recognize that working remotely will go from what was previously something that we just encouraged occasionally, but now a much bigger part of the way that we work, and in the long term. No matter when the lockdown will end, our expectation is that as a company, we will now evolve to a much more fully remote working environment than ever before. So it's extremely important for us to make sure that we've got the right actions in place to deliver a fulfilling work environment. So thank you very much for listening, and hope that was helpful, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
So I can see there's one question: where is the limit between giving independence and managing performance? So I guess that's probably maybe more to do with my area. Nick, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
Good question. I think obviously it's a balance. I think, as I mentioned before, as much as you want to be supporting remote worker autonomy and independence in your team, you still want to make sure that our vision and their tasks are aligned. That's the big thing. You don't want them to be going rogue, I guess, and in line with those, overall aims of the team or the project that's going on. So I guess that is something you can keep in check with, well, as I mentioned, team visibility, constant communication, and definitely updates on those goals and aims to kind of just check in with everyone and see overall how everyone's independent efforts are working towards that main goal and main team project. I think that's all of the questions. Thank you very much, guys. Take care, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot.